For thousands of years, the stars had been mapped and measured by the Galactic Council. Species from every corner of the galaxy had shared knowledge, made treaties, and expanded together. Their maps were massive and detailed, each system marked with color-coded borders, space lanes, and known hazards. But on every map, there was one section, one dark and silent stretch of stars that was never labeled with names or routes. It was marked in gray, with only two words: human space. And though centuries had passed since anyone dared to approach it, no one ever questioned why. Some called it superstition, others a forgotten war, but deep down, every species knew that something had happened there. Something terrible or powerful enough to make the most war-hungry empires agree to stay away forever. That silence, that mystery, had become part of galactic law. Even pirates and outlaws steered clear of those borders, and artificial navigation systems were programmed to auto-divert any ship that got too close. It wasn't just fear. It was respect. Cold, uncomfortable respect for something nobody really understood. But not everyone accepted mystery. Not Arlek Jor. A young diplomat from the Delari Union, Arlek had always questioned things others avoided. He was calm, intelligent, and unusually curious for someone raised in a world ruled by logic and caution. When he stood before the Galactic Council and asked to launch a diplomatic mission into human space, the chamber fell into a heavy silence. Representatives shifted in their seats, glanced at each other, and waited for someone else to speak. Finally, one of the elder counselors, a four-eyed being from the Varn Collective, leaned forward and said, "Why would you disturb a silence that protects us all?" But Arlek, bold as ever, replied, "Because fear without knowledge is not wisdom. And we claim to be wise." Reluctantly, and with warnings wrapped in ancient language, the council allowed the mission, but only if Arlek took full responsibility. No fleets, no backup, no escorts. Just a single ship, a hand-picked crew, and strict orders. Observe, report, do not provoke. The ship, Pathfinder's Whisper, was sleek and quiet, equipped with the finest sensors, stealth technology, and diplomatic tools. Arlek's crew included a language AIA medic, a pilot from the neutral Ventari race, and two cultural specialists. All were nervous, but none refused. As the ship approached the edge of human space, everyone stared at the star field beyond the last marked line on the map. It looked no different: stars, planets, drifting light, but there was something about it. An emptiness. Not of matter, but of intention. Like a room waiting for someone to enter it wrong. Arlek gave the command to cross. The ship's engines hummed softly, and the border disappeared behind them. No alarms. No weapons. No warnings. Just silence. For 2 days, they drifted through system after system. Beautiful planets, some lush with forests and water, others glowing with industrial patterns that suggested advanced terraforming. Yet not a single ship or signal appeared. Every world seemed inhabited, but no one greeted them, no one challenged them. On the 3rd day, the ship's sensors picked up a beacon from a planet labeled only as Halcyon. It offered docking instructions in perfect galactic standard, along with a gentle message: visitors detected. Welcome. The crew exchanged glances, uncertain whether to follow the invitation. Arlek nodded. We came for answers. Let's accept the greeting. As they landed, they saw a world both peaceful and powerful. Towering cities rose from clean landscapes, surrounded by green hills and blue oceans. It didn't feel like a fortress, it felt like home. Waiting at the docking bay was a single human. She looked like any other humanoid, wearing a simple uniform with no weapons. Welcome to Halcyon, she said. I'm Mira, ambassador of planetary outreach. Her smile was calm, kind, but her eyes carried a strange depth, as if she had seen more than a single life should allow. Arlek introduced himself and his crew, and Mira nodded politely. It has been 243 years since we had visitors, she said, as if discussing the weather. Most stay away. Some forget. A few remember why. The crew tried to ask about the reason. The wars, the silence, the fear. But Mira only said, You will see if you choose to stay. They were taken to a city called Solara, where everything ran with perfect balance. Energy flowed through the streets like light. Children learned astrophysics in parks. Machines worked. Can you more? That's how far we had to go to be left in peace. That night, Arlik met with his crew in private. The pilot, a Ventari named Kyle, voiced what everyone was thinking. These people are too calm, too controlled. I've never felt so welcome and so small at the same time. The medic added, I scanned one of their public hospitals. They don't even need surgery anymore. Their nanotech does things I didn't think were physically possible. One of the cultural specialists, a linguist, leaned forward. It's not just their tech. It's them. Their children speak with layered context. They joke in metaphors we haven't caught up with yet. Their brains don't work like ours anymore. Arlik listened, his expression serious. They weren't just observing a different species, they were observing something that had evolved in a direction the galaxy had never anticipated. A civilization that had advanced far beyond anyone else and had deliberately chosen not to dominate the stars. The question wasn't just what had happened, but why they had stopped. The next day, Mira offered to take Arlik somewhere different. They flew in a silent aircraft smooth as breath toward a place called the Vault of Horizons. It wasn't a fortress or museum, but a massive structure carved into the side of a mountain, its interior glowing with soft blue light. Inside, Arlik saw holographic images of galaxies, shifting timelines, and coded records protected by layers of quantum encryption. This is where we keep the truth, Mira said, walking slowly beside him. But not all truths are gifts. Some are burdens. We will not give them lightly. At the center of the vault stood a chamber that pulsed faintly with light. Mira placed her hand on a panel, and a recording began to play not sound, but memories. Arlik saw flashes of ships, millions of them entering human space long ago. Not one fleet, but many. He recognized ancient council designs, old war banners, forgotten empires. And then he saw what followed. Ships collapsing mid-jump. Weapons disarmed by systems they didn't understand. Entire fleets vanishing in perfect silence. Not one shot fired by humans. No retaliation, just removal. Something about the recording felt clean, cold, controlled. It was not war. It was precision. As if the galaxy had thrown its full strength at Earth and found nothing to strike. They came to take, Mira said, her voice barely a whisper. They believed we were fractured, weak, worth seizing. What they didn't see was what we had become. We didn't become monsters. We became sovereign. Arlik staggered back, breath caught in his throat. You didn't fight them. No, Mira said. We ended the conversation before it began. Arlik turned to her, struggling to understand. Why hide this? Why keep everyone in the dark? Mira looked at him kindly, yet with a weight that made the air feel thick. Because if they knew, they would fear us again. And fear breeds aggression. We left the galaxy to its own path so it could grow freely. But some still look at borders as dares. As they left the vault, Arlik realized something chilling and beautiful. The humans hadn't isolated themselves because they were afraid. They had isolated themselves because they weren't. They had seen what lay ahead of the galaxy's curve, and instead of ruling, they stepped back. Not out of weakness, but out of absolute confidence. They had nothing to prove. Back aboard his ship, Arlik looked at the galactic map once more. That gray line, once a mystery, was now something else entirely. It wasn't a wall. It was a warning. And across it, something watched the galaxy, not with malice, but with the quiet patience of a teacher waiting to see if the students would learn without intervention. And still, no one had dared ask why the map ended there. Until now. The Vault of Horizons changed everything for Arlik Jor. What he had seen inside it was not just history, it was a buried truth too vast for most to carry. The humans hadn't fought back in the way other species did. They didn't retaliate or scream across the stars. They simply erased the threat. Cleanly. Permanently. The fleets that had entered their space centuries ago hadn't been destroyed. They had been neutralized, as if humanity had rewritten the rules of physics for a moment, stepped outside time, and decided the outcome of the battle before it began. Arlek couldn't stop thinking about that calm silence the way Mira had shown it, not with pride, but with restraint. There had been no celebration in that memory, no joy in victory, only resolve. Now, back in the city of Solara, Mira walked with him through a vast corridor made of glass and polished stone. They passed what looked like statues at first, until Arlek noticed that each one wore different uniforms, some old, some alien. These were the ones who chose peace, Mira explained. Not all who came to us came with war in their hearts. Some came seeking understanding. And for them, we offered the Legacy Protocol. Arlek raised an eyebrow. What is that? Mira's voice lowered. A truth-binding agreement. A sharing of knowledge, carefully measured, deeply encoded. We give them the story, but only if they agree never to use it for conquest. Arlek realized then that this was the reason some civilizations still thrived along the borders of human space, those who remembered the line and honored it. You control who knows, Arlek said. And how much? Mira nodded. Because not every species is ready. We were not ready, once. Before the severance, we were divided, loud and reckless. But something happened, something that forced us to face what we truly were capable of. The Quiet War wasn't a war of blood. It was a war of becoming. She led him to a chamber beneath the city, dark, cold, and humming with energy. A vast sphere floated in the air, its surface alive with pulses of light that moved like breathing. This, she said, is the Legacy Core. It holds every event, every decision, every calculation that led us here. Arlek stepped closer and felt something touch his mind, not aggressively, but with curiosity, like a hand brushing past memories. Suddenly, images filled his thoughts. Humanity standing on the brink of collapse, then rising not through domination, but unity. They had abandoned borders, currency, even political power. They became something more driven, not by greed, but balance. They learned to edit their minds, strengthen empathy, enhance reason. Their war was against themselves, and they had won. The result was terrifying, a civilization that understood how to reshape energy, control time in fragments, influence systems at a quantum level, and chose not to weaponize it. They had instead chosen discipline. And that was the real reason the galaxy feared them. Not because they were aggressive, but because they were capable of unimaginable things, yet chose silence over supremacy. Arlek backed away, breath shallow, shaken by what he had seen. If the Council knew this, he whispered. Mira tilted her head. They once did. But over generations, truth faded into myth. We allowed that. Fear kept them away. But you came without fear. Arlek sat down slowly. Why show me this now? Because the galaxy is stirring again, she said. We've heard whispers. A fleet is being assembled, a test, they call it. They think we've grown soft, or perhaps they've forgotten. Either way, you needed to see the truth before returning. The words struck him hard. Somewhere out there, the Council or a faction within it had decided to cross the line again. To test human space, perhaps to provoke it, and they had no idea what awaited them. You'll stop them? He asked. Mira didn't answer immediately. We won't need to. If they step across that line, their choice will define their fate. The Legacy Protocol activates only when trust is broken. Arlek thought of the fleets in the past, vanished into quiet. He thought of the humans who lived in perfect balance, guarding a power no one else could understand. And he realized something he hadn't before. The map didn't stop at human space because of some old treaty. It stopped because this was where evolution had turned a corner. The rest of the galaxy still played with fire, while the humans had already walked through it and learned to shape the flame. Now, with dread building in his chest, Arlek knew what he had to do. He would return. He would warn the Council. But would they listen? Would they hear a diplomat speaking about a quiet civilization with the power to erase wars? Or would they scoff, as arrogant minds often did? As Mira escorted him back to his ship, she placed a small object in his palm, a crystal, warm to the touch. "This will speak for you, if your voice fails," she said. "But remember, Arlek Jor, the truth we shared with you is not a weapon. It is a weight. Carry it wisely." And as the Pathfinder's whisper lifted off, pulling away from Halcyon and into the stars once more, Arlek looked back at the shining cities, the peaceful landscapes, and the people who had once faced the stars and chosen to walk away. They weren't hiding. They were waiting. The journey back from human space was quiet, but Arlek Jor's mind was loud with thought. The stars outside the ship's window looked the same, but nothing felt familiar anymore. He was carrying something no one else in the galaxy had seen with their own eyes for centuries, proof that the myths were true, that the humans were not only alive and thriving, but watching from the edge of the void with power wrapped in silence. The small crystal Mira had given him pulsed faintly in his hand as if aware of his burden. When Pathfinder's whisper finally arrived at the Galactic Council hub, the welcome was cold and impatient. The council chamber, filled with towering diplomats of every species, echoed with doubts before Arlek had even spoken. He stood at the center, surrounded by ancient flags and shimmering lights, and gave them the truth. He spoke of the Vault of Horizons, the erased fleets, the human's choice to step away from power, and the warning that another test was coming. He ended by placing the crystal on the floor. For a heartbeat, nothing happened. Then the air shimmered, and a soft blue projection unfolded Mira's voice. Her face, her message. "If this message reaches you, then one of yours has seen the truth. You must decide whether that truth will guide you or undo you. The choice will not be ours, it will be yours." When the message ended, the chamber was silent. But it didn't last. Laughter broke from one of the war delegates, an old general from the Kravari Dominion. "They sent you back with a bedtime story," he sneered. "What is this? A riddle? The humans haven't shown strength, they've shown fear. Isolation is weakness." Arlek tried to argue, but it was like shouting into a storm. Other voices joined in, suspicious, mocking, or worse, hungry. The idea of humanity holding something beyond anyone else's understanding wasn't terrifying to them, it was tempting. Power always drew the greedy. Within days, the council fractured. Some races sided with caution, urging to leave the boundary untouched. Others, led by the Dominion, saw it as an opportunity to strike before the humans regained their nerve. Intelligence reports soon confirmed what Arlek had feared. A massive fleet was forming, just outside the edge of the gray zone. Hundreds of ships, war-ready, aimed like a knife at the quiet border. Their goal wasn't diplomacy, it was proof. Proof that the humans were bluffing. Arlek pleaded for them to stop, but his voice had no weight against the momentum of pride and ambition. Alone in his quarters, he stared at the galactic map again. That line, so thin, so ignored by many, was more than a warning. It was a threshold. Cross it, and you didn't just test a civilization, you tested what humanity had become. The Legacy Protocol didn't stop invasions. It waited for them. And then it made sure no one tried again. Arlek sent one last encrypted message to Mira. "They're coming." "I tried." Her reply was just one line: "We are still watching." Then, silence. And days later, the fleet crossed the line. Not with violence at first, but with arrogance. As soon as their lead ship touched human space, all communications vanished. Arlek waited with the galaxy, holding its breath. Minutes passed. Then hours. Then days. Not a single ship returned. No debris. No transmissions. No sign of war. Just nothing. As if they had never existed. The fleet had been removed, not destroyed, not attacked, but lifted out of the equation entirely. The same way a master mathematician erases a mistake from a chalkboard. Across the galaxy, fear bloomed like wildfire. The truth hit them harder than any weapon could. The humans had never stopped being powerful. They had simply stopped playing the game. And now, the rest of the galaxy had to answer the one question left hanging in the dark. If humanity no longer plays by our rules, what rules are we even following? Arlek knew the answer already. The humans weren't just waiting. They were measuring, observing, learning. And when they moved again, it wouldn't be to conquer. It would be to decide who among them was ready to take the next step, and who would be left behind. In the days that followed the disappearance of the fleet, the galaxy fell into a silence unlike anything it had known before. Entire star systems that once buzzed with chatter and ambition now watched the gray line on their maps with a reverence that bordered on fear. No wreckage returned, no survivors drifted back, just absence, absolute and intentional. The council fell into chaos, leaders arguing in hushed tones, afraid to say aloud what they all now understood. Humanity had not just survived its past, it had surpassed it, stepped so far ahead that they had become something else entirely. Not gods. Not tyrants. But guardians of a path no one else yet understood. Across thousands of planets, people began asking quiet questions in dark corners. What was on the other side of that silence? What did the humans see when they looked at the rest of the galaxy? And most dangerously, what would happen if someone tried again? Arlek Jor, once a curious diplomat and now a haunted witness, found himself speaking less and watching more. He had returned to the stars with a warning, but the galaxy had needed a lesson instead. And it had received one. One without blood, without war, just a clean reminder that not all power is loud. Some of it waits. Some of it listens. And some of it simply removes those who cannot be trusted. Arlek began writing quietly, chronicling what he had seen, what he had felt, trying to make sense of a civilization that had chosen not to lead the galaxy, but to outgrow it. His words traveled slowly, hand-carried across systems by couriers too wise to speak them aloud. As his record spread, more chose to turn away from expansion and conquest and look inward, just as the humans once had. Empires shrank. Wars paused. New philosophies rose, built not on fear of humans, but the possibility of what a civilization might become if it truly evolved. No one approached the line again. In time, cartographers stopped labeling human space with warnings. They marked it simply with a soft gray field and one single phrase written in ancient common tongue: the line remains. For generations, that line became a symbol not of power, but of restraint, of potential, of the great question humanity had never asked for others to answer, but had answered for itself. And still, on the other side of that line, the humans watched not as conquerors, not as rulers, but as quiet architects of a future that only the worthy would one day share. The galaxy kept spinning. Stars were born and died. But the line never moved. It didn't need to. Because everyone, everywhere, now knew better than to ask why.